that we are working on the lands traditionally occupied by the Indigenous peoples. Indigenous people continue to care for this land and continue to shape our township. We show our respect and will continually honor the treaties that were signed as we consider our decisions and actions. This morning, there is a public meeting scheduled for 1 consent application and 7 minor variance applications. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the Secretary-Treasurer will advise the committee as to when, how, and to whom notice of each of the hearings was circulated for the applications being considered. Next, each of the applications will be considered separately. Planning staff will advise as of the purpose and effect of the applications and provide any other information that is relevant. The Secretary-Treasurer will summarize all correspondence on file. From there, the applicant will make a brief presentation if they so choose, and the public will have an opportunity to speak to the applications being considered. After the public forum, the committee will then deliberate on the proposed applications and consider a motion to pass, defeat, or defer the decision for the applications. The consent application scheduled for this morning is B24-01. The minor variance applications being considered this morning are A23-18, A24-15, A24-16, A24-18, A24-19, A-24-20, and A24-21. Before we begin, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Yes, Member Jarvis.
I'll be declaring a conflict of interest in the case of the minor variance 7A A23-18.
Okay, thank you. That was a conflict of interest. Any other conflict of interest declarations? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward. And I would just point out, Member Jarvis, even though you have a conflict of interest concern, A23-18 for 211 Couture Lane is going to be deferred this morning, so you will not have to have a conflict.
I won't have to vacate my seat temporarily?
No, we will not.
Okay.
Okay, our first application is B24-01 for 7443 Lake Joseph Road. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do our first consent, I have a motion, be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves the minutes of March 7, 2024 as circulated. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. The motion is carried. I would also ask our Secretary-Treasurer to provide information on correspondence.
Notice of each of the applications was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, or to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may have also been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
Thank you very much. And as mentioned, our first application this morning is a consent application B24-01 for 7443 Lake Joseph Road. To the planner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, I'll share my screen. Mr. Chairman, committee, and everyone in attendance here and online. My name is Jeff Kratke. I am a registered professional planner employed by the Township of Georgian Bay as a planner too. The application B2401 that is before the committee is located municipally at 7443 Lake Joseph Road. And the agent on behalf of the applicants is Debbie Vandenaker of Planscape, who is also a registered professional planner. The subject lands are located in the far northeastern part of the township, just outside of McTier, along what used to be Highway 69. They're located and include much of the existing original lots to the north and east of Lake Joseph Road and Silver Sands Lake Road. The purpose of the application B2401 is to provide the subject lands, divide the subject lands from one lot into two lots, with the effect of creating retained lands in red on this drawing of approximately 40.45 hectares and severed lands of in yellow on this sketch of approximately 36.4 hectares. Originally, this public meeting was scheduled before this committee on February 16th, but agency and peer review comments led to deferrals, which this committee supported. The public and agencies were kept informed during those deferrals, and the application was not significantly revised. Therefore, there was no further mail out for this meeting today. I believe the agent is online, and I believe that she will be presenting her report to you. So my report will focus on, my presentation will focus on my report. And I thought the clerk was going to read into the record the public correspondence, but I will quickly do so. The public and agency correspondence. There was one piece of public correspondence in support of the application, and there were comments from the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, generally supportive, comments from the district, generally supportive. Both of those attachments are found to my report. The Barrie District Office of the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks requested species at risk branch of MECP to identify someone to comment. On February 1st, Sterling Engineering, on behalf of Budget Propane, wrote to identify no concerns under the Technical Standards and Safety Act of 2000. On February 8th, our fire chief declared an interest, and I was hoping he would be here today, but I gather he is unable. On February 14th, the Technical Standards and Safety Authority confirmed that it shall reply to an inquiry that I made regarding the whereabouts of redacted publicly available budget propane emergency response and preparedness plan. On March 6th, 2023, Kelly, as the chief building official, indicated her interest in the septic system. On March 7th, Hydro One wrote stating no concerns at this time. On March 7th as well, the MECP noted that should Species at Risk Ontario be unable to comment, that the application is the responsibility of the proponent to ensure compliance with relevant regulations. And subsequently, I believe on April 3rd or 4th, Species at Risk Ontario commented. They included 4 issues. Their comments were forwarded to the committee before this meeting. The Muskoka District Official Plan includes the subject lands within certain areas that have been identified for extreme fire hazard. As well, it shows the subject lands as within the rural area, a PSW, and wetlands. The extreme fire risk is generally coincident with the PSW. The Georgian Bay Official Plan as well designates the subject lands as rural and PSW. It also shows an area of aggregate potential, which I will discuss later in my report. The zoning bylaw zones the subject lands as rural and PSW. And as you can see on Google Satellite View, there is a significant wetland here, as well as tablelands, where the existing residence is located in this area, and where the proposed future development area approximately here is located. While I agree with the agent's recommendations to the committee in most respects, there is one important area in where I differ, and that is the need for a rezoning to protect the PSW and the species at risk and habitats that have been identified through the EIS peer review process. I'm recommending a condition be affixed to this decision of the committee, should it approve this consent, that a new RUXX-HXX zone be applied for by the applicants to council. And its purpose for exceptions would be to prohibit forestry use on the property, prohibit development within 120 meters of the PSW, require clearing of vegetation to satisfy fire smart to mitigate wildland fire, but not allow such clearing within the 120 meter setback from the PSW, and create a natural buffer within 30 meters of the PSW. And the purpose for the holding provision is to recognize that in this case, the applicant and the agent have made it clear that they have no immediate intention to develop the property. And so rather than include a condition for a consent agreement that would require certain things to be satisfied sooner rather than later, the notion is that the holding zone would be in effect potentially forever, without need to address the further issues identified through the EIS. But those holding provisions include a full evaluation for bat maternity colonies, full field study for eastern hognose snake hibernation and oviposition sites, including consultation with MECP, full field study for Massasauga rattlesnake hibernation and oviposition sites, including consultation with MECP and reference to Index 13 of the Significant Wildlife Mitigation Support Tool, and the opportunity that should important EIS matters be unable to be addressed through those circumstances at the time that a development application is actually made, that there's an opportunity that council require an undertaking agreement for any remaining recommendations that need to be attached to a development. Secondly, it's important that the committee consider land use compatibility with respect to this application, despite the fact that there are no immediate plans for a development of the proposed lot to be severed. One of the land uses nearby is, or on the adjacent lands, is budget propane. And certainly under the Technical Standards and Safety Act, budget propane comments to this committee with respect to nearby developments. And that act considers developments with respect to a risk assessment, which speaks to probabilities. The Planning Act and the tests under Section 51 of the Planning Act, which we apply to Section 53 consent applications, speak to other matters. And essentially in planning, we look to plan for and either avoid or mitigate reasonable worst case scenarios. The budget propane emergency response and preparedness plan is a document that should be publicly available and for unknown reasons is not. The township does have a confidential copy, which the fire chief has shared with me in the preparation of my report. And it is my recommendation to the committee that in addition to the condition for rezoning with respect to protecting the PSW, species at risk, and natural habitats, that the committee also include in that condition the need to provide for mitigation by avoidance, where a habitable structure or dwelling would be outside of the 200-meter radius. And that leaves a significant area of land within the development area, which you can see crosshatched here with a double crosshatching for the potential future dwelling or hunt lodge camp or other such human habitation structure or building that might be put on this property. Secondly, the Georgian Bay official plan requires two things with respect to this application be considered regarding land use compatibility. One is that there are existing pits, not quarries, and I think that's an important distinction that is not made in our official plan. There's an existing pit located where this star is. There are additional pits located further to the west. Those pits in our official plan essentially prohibit development within 1,000 meters. I disagree with that policy direction from our official plan. I do not see it as being justified. While in the long distant past, pits and quarries were considered under the deseparation guidelines provided by the Ministry of the Environment. That is no longer the case. But even in those long days gone past, the 1,000 meters was an area of influence. It was never supported as an area of outright prohibition of development. And the current MNRF guides with respect to pits look at an area of influence of only 120 meters. This site is the developable area is approximately 430 meters to the west of the proposed severed lands. And if you factor in that circle that I'm recommending with respect to budget propane, it increases that separation to 640 meters. In my professional opinion, this is ample separation distance from the existing pits. The other part of the policy in the official plan deals with the protection of these lands identified in yellow for aggregate extraction. And the challenge with planning is that we always need to balance policies. And in this case, it's my professional recommendation to this committee that it is more important to protect the PSW and the habitats of endangered species than it would be to protect the aggregate resource that's been identified on these lands. And therefore, it is my recommendation that the development proposal before the committee, being the consent to sever the lot, is far superior than would be a proposal for a pit. So lastly, I want to add, I'm sorry, I will back up my slide presentation. Lastly, I want to add that there are some remaining conditions that are more standard conditions that are associated with our applications for consent to sever, such as parkland dedication and reference plan preparation, registration on title of a transaction, etc. And those I do not go into detail in my report or in my presentation, but certainly if you wish to ask questions about them, I'm happy to answer them. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the recommended conditions being fulfilled by the agent and or owner make it that I am of the professional planning opinion that an approval by the committee of the application for consent before you today is in keeping with, is consistent with, let me back up, is consistent with the PPS, gives regard to subsection 5312 of the Planning Act, which are the tests that refer back to section 51 in the Planning Act, and conforms with the Muskoka official plan, the Georgian Bay official plan, and again, with the condition for a rezoning, the Georgian Bay zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krentke. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence in this application?
One letter of support was received from James Moen. One letter requesting information was received from Jeremy Thompson. And then our planner has already summarized all the agency comments, so I'm just not going to go through those again, but
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present or online, and do they wish to add to the planner's comments?
Hello, everybody. I'm the applicant's agent, if I could speak to it now.
It's a little louder. Is that something that we can deal with, or?
Am I too loud?
Yeah, but we can hear you very clearly. Yeah.
Sorry, I promise I'm not yelling. Is that better?
Okay, please proceed.
Okay, fabulous. So as Mr. Kratke noted, my name is Debbie Vandenacker. I'm a senior planner here at Planscape in Bracebridge. It's 104 Kimberley Avenue, P1L1Z8. So just to do a quick summary of from the applicant's perspective of the application, I'm happy to see that, and I would agree that Mr. Kratke's report recommends approval of the consent. I just wanted to give you a little bit of sort of anecdotal history. The Veitch family is a longstanding family in the area. They have been protecting these lands for 80 plus years. The PSW itself is incredibly important to them. They are well aware of the species there. They are aware of the additional studies that have taken place. They actually go so far as to limit the amount of study that they allow M&R or MECP to come in and do, because they don't want any damage to it. So just a little bit of context that this is a very land use responsible family and they want to keep it that way. The intent for the consent is that they want to plan for just succession planning with the property. There's 3 kids between the 2 owners, and they want to make sure that each of the kids sort of has their legacy piece of property. There has been extensive work identifying the building envelope in this instance. So typically, we would see a building envelope maybe required to be identified in the rural area. So the zoning the way it is right now with the EP lands, you can't build on the EP lands. It's always the landowner's responsibility to protect species at risk. It always has been, it always will be. And in the rural lands currently, the Veitches could do forestry use, could cut all of the trees at the front, could build accessory dwellings, all of those things. They really have no interest in this. They're just trying to plan for the future. So what we have done at the urging and the request of staff is identify this very specific building envelope. So for months now, EIS work and peer review has been going back and forth to ensure that there is ultimate protection. I quite frankly, in my career, have never seen this level of detail go into it. So if and when a development happens on this property, it will be subject to the identified building envelope, which has been separated into 2 sections. As Mr. Kratke noted, I do not share the concern. Budget Propane has provided technical advice that they were not concerned with safety issues across the road. They have no issue with this type of development occurring across the road. That being said, the concern was raised from your staff. So we have identified the farthest away building envelope to ensure that any residential dwelling would happen in that sort of double hatched area. So there's about 2 acres there, lots of space that any future owner, if they were deciding to build a structure, they could do that. The rest of the building envelope was identified through the EIS. So these are lands that not only have ground truth the PSW that's on site, they have added the 120 meter buffer, which is appropriate to do. And so the second half of the building envelope that has been identified would be just for accessory structures, if there was a garage, if there was a shed, those kind of things. So just to put it in the context of what we're talking about, so the consent condition would have the rezoning, which will only allow development in those 2 building envelopes that have been identified. Everything else will be EP. So it's actually a net gain to the property in terms of environmental protection, what would be there. After that, to ensure that any development, and we're talking now limited development, would account for bats and snakes, essentially is what it is. Anybody who does develop would also have to study that specifically at the time. And so Mr. Kratke is correct. I don't agree with the process. It is what it is, though. If this is what the applicant needs to do that, I think I think there are a number of ways that the same protections are offered. But if this is the recommendation of staff, then that's where we are. So I just wanted to offer that. Hopefully, between the two of us, we've explained that there's been a great deal of thought and care gone into this application, and in my professional opinion as well, that this is an appropriate consent, and that I am here to answer any questions you have. Also, the owner is online. Should you have any sort of historical questions about the property, anything like that, Dave is available as well. So thank you for your time.
And thank you, Debbie. We will come back to you if there are any questions or concerns. Has there any member of the public either available here or online that wishes to address this application? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public portion of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or concerns. And I see a hand up, Member Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To our planner, a couple of things come to light in just your summary there. One, the H hold that you're recommending we put on there, the H designation, comes with specific requirements for lifting of that H should the property, a development want to be done on the property. And those conditions are certain conditions as of today. Would those same conditions apply in 20 years' time, or would there be whatever conditions presumably conditions will change for lifting a hold between now and whenever this might be developed. Which conditions of lifting the hold would apply should the hold be requested, be a lift on the hold be requested in the future?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I didn't go into as much detail on the proposed rezoning at this point because obviously that is a matter that would be considered in the future by council should the applicants wish to proceed and should the committee assign the condition. The answer is part of the more detailed wording with respect to the zoning bylaw is to require that should the EIS, and Debbie may want to correct me if I've got this wrong, that the EIS be updated if it is more than 2030, I believe was the year that we arrived at. So there is the fail-safe that an EIS update might be required, or, I mean, if it's 100 years from now, a completely new study might be required. Additionally, the undertaking agreement is there as an option should things in the future arise which are not of concern today. Admittedly, an undertaking agreement is not as strong as a consent agreement because it cannot be registered on title without both parties agreeing to it being registered on title. So the municipality is working at that point from a position of a private party as opposed to from a municipal authority position under the Planning Act. But it still does provide for the compromise between requiring things today of the applicant that would appear to be unnecessary given their stated intention to not immediately proceed with development and their certainly very long history with the property versus fulfilling the municipal and the committee's requirement to ensure that when creating a lot, that lot can be developed and can be used properly.
Okay, thank you for that.
Couple more questions.
Yes, please go ahead, Mr. Jarvis.
The propane facility across the street is, and I appreciate the information provided, but you said something about there being a confidential report that's with our fire chief. What kind of information was that again?
So every propane facility in Ontario is required to prepare annually both a document that provides information to the TSSA as well as includes what's known as an emergency response and preparedness plan. The township fire chief is responsible for approving it, and so he receives a confidential copy that can be shared internally with staff and certainly in camera with council, but cannot be made publicly available. The TSSA maintains a directory of these documents on their website that is supposed to make all of them available to the public. However, the copy that is made available to the public is redacted, and neither the fire chief nor I have any idea what redactions take place prior to that document being made available to the public. And so at this point, without the public version of the emergency response and preparedness plan, we cannot provide it to you. I had hoped that Tony Van Dam would be able to attend today, but clearly he was unavailable.
So it's is it the public version of the plan that is giving you direction on how that building envelope is to be determined? Or where did that,
Without the advantage of seeing the public version, I cannot honestly say.
and in light of propane explosions we've had in the last 10 and 15 years in Canada, I'd be a little bit concerned, but I see a member, well, Tony over there has something comment that might help me out on this.
Thank you, Chair Hill. So reviewing a extremely long application process and the information that we've been provided, and a little bit of research, and this is something that I struggle with, is that the applicant approximately has had ownership of this property for 72 years longer than budget. I struggle when somebody comes into an area and their use imposes on the rights of somebody who is a longstanding resident and obviously an ambassador of the land that they have. So I think sometimes when we look at these applications for something like this use that's going to impose its, powers over everybody else, if they want to have the power, then buy it. That's always been my rule of thumb. So it would seem to me that there's been an extensive process done here. Like the same thing as having a gravel pit that is in X amount of distance affecting somebody's property rights. If this family is choosing to do the severance as a estate planning, resale, whatever their choices are for their rights on something that was arguably existing two concession properties that were merged, this has seemed like a very onerous process already, in my opinion. So I guess my thoughts is there is considerable amount of limitation to what can be done. They're already jumping through hoops to get a consent done. If they wanted to then do a future subdivision agreement or, do more development on this property, they're going to be put through an extremely fine lens to do anything more with this property, I would assume. My concern is that if we put in all these additional conditions and rezoning, what type of cost do you figure that would approximately impose on the property owners? Is that a fair question?
Well, are you opposing the holding restriction?
I'm struggling that this particular property owner's already had a number of things laid on top of them because of other people's uses. And then to further add more holding and limitations to a consent severance of such two large parcels of land. If I was the applicant, I would struggle with the level of hoops that are being imposed from a property right standpoint. That's just my.
Well, maybe we bring this question back in that the reason for having the holding restriction on this property is to, your concerns for the future environmental impact of doing development on the land?
Correct, Mr. Chair. I'd like to answer sort of all the questions I think that have been asked, if I could, Mr. Chair. Number one, there was no additional delay to the process with respect to consideration of land use compatibility. The delays were caused by MECP indicating that SARO should comment before the committee considered the application. We waited patiently for that comment. It did not arrive before my report, but given that the applicant's agent had indicated she rightly had felt we had given SARO plenty of time to comment, that we proceeded to this meeting today. SARO did comment, and you do have that comment before you, which I think is helpful, but they were the delay. In terms of process, typically, we would require a rezoning in this case to protect the PSW given the EIS. However, typically where development is more imminent, we would also be requesting the committee approve a condition for a consent agreement. And that consent agreement would implement many things in the EIS that we cannot put in zoning. And essentially what I am asking the committee to do as a compromise between my desire to make sure the committee approves a lot that could be sold to anyone versus a lot that may be held by family members that have held the land for already a century, for another century without development, is to not require them to do more than the rezoning, which I would be recommending to you today, regardless of both the approach and budget propane. The difference is that normally the zoning would likely not include multiple conditions for removal of the hold. The simple condition would be a registration of the consent agreement on title. And the consent agreement itself would include all of those issues, some of which I've put specifically into the conditions for the rezoning, such as the further study of the bat habitats and protection and study of the two snakes. And then lastly, the last part of your question, with respect to land use compatibility, that is something that we are required as planners to speak to under the Planning Act. It is required under the Planning Act. It's one of the tests this committee must consider. The way in which the Technical Safety and Standards Act requires budget to measure land use compatibility is fundamentally different than the way in which the Planning Act requires the committee to consider land use compatibility. And essentially, the reasonable worst case scenarios that I'm asking you to consider are not likely. I would put this akin to the 1 in 100 year flood. It's not likely that you're going to have a 1 in 100 year flood. However, it is a reasonable worst case scenario for us to plan for. And therefore, again, what I'm asking the committee to do, and unfortunately, I would rather they had more public information. What I'm asking the committee to do is to plan for something that is highly unlikely, but is a reasonable worst case scenario. And the difference between the two pieces of legislation is that one speaks to probabilities and one speaks to reasonable worst case scenarios. And there is a section in the Planning Act, which is not repeated in the TSSA, which states that in the event of a conflict, the Planning Act stands and is the one to be followed. And so I would urge the committee to take its responsibilities under the Planning Act seriously with respect to this, appreciating that I'm seeing something that you are not, that the applicant is not, that the agent is not, and that is not the way the process is supposed to be. It is unfortunately the way the process is today before you.
Okay, then I think that's a pretty good coverage of that that question. But before we proceed,
If I could, one comment.
I just want to proceed with some more information on that same subject before we get another topic on the table. And I see we still have Ms. Vandenaker on here. And from the applicant standpoint, we've obviously had the opportunity to discuss this holding restriction in detail with Mr. Kratzky. And what is the what are your feelings on the impact of that restriction on this consent application?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. So all due respect to everybody involved in this process, land use planning has to consider all items. At the end of the day, what I look at is risk to the municipality of coming from complaints, risk to the applicant and to the landowner. So my view of this is the consent application is appropriate regardless. When an applicant goes to build in the future, my opinion of where the responsibility lies is does this lot have appropriate area to build on in the future, period? That's the answer. And the answer is yes. So that's where I would have stopped. So in this case, however, I understand Mr. Kratky's concerns. I understand he's got a lot of additional expertise in propane. My objection there is that as a professional planner, I asked the experts for their opinion, and they did provide a technical letter back that said they had no concern with this type of development. So understanding, of course, Mr. Kratky has dug deeper in this, which is why we identified those two building envelopes. So if, and I'm not sure that you asked this question, but if I had a real objection to the conditions on this consent, it is that we are layering approvals on top of approvals when they are not necessary for the protection of the environment nor the applicant in future. If we simply recognize those two building envelopes as they are, when a person goes to get a building permit in the future, they will have to comply, i.e. they will have to locate a residential structure within the one area. Any accessory structures would have to be in the other. They are always responsible for species at risk. So you cannot go and just clear your lot right now, even though he can right now and in the rural zone. You're always responsible for species at risk. That hasn't changed. So my issue with this is always when you open up a planning application, yes, there are certain levels of responsibility that you have to look into in terms of where it's going to be built in future, but this does seem exceedingly onerous. The applicant does struggle through this process, and my struggle for him is that there is going to be a number of approvals going forward. And so not only will Jeff have to go, or sorry, not Jeff, Dave have to go through the rezoning process, but then there's going to have to be agreements, and then somebody will have to lift the hold and. In my opinion, the rezoning will protect the building envelope, will adequately protect from an environmental perspective. That is my background. Or an agreement gets put on title that gets registered that speaks to the EIS as it is now. That was always my original thought process. When we've added on these layers of protection, and it is ultimate protection. I mean, you can't get any more restrictive than this, I don't think, without saying no. I believe one or the other is appropriate as opposed to both. That being said, the ultimate goal of the applicant is to have this approved. So if this is what committee requires, then of course that's what will be done.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Member Schmidt, was there something further you wanted to query?
Just respectfully, when we compare 100-year flood, that's something that is sort of controlled by a way higher power than we are. When it's being controlled by a secondary property use that's imposed on somebody, that's the part I struggle with. Right? There's a difference between a 100-year flood and a use coming in to a neighboring property that encumbers their ability to use and enjoy their property. I'm just trying to differentiate between those two items. And I respect that we have to give that space.
Okay.
That's done, but that's all. I'm sorry. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I think everybody is clear on both the position of the applicant and the township, and it is reflected in the resolution that I am about to read. Moved by Member Hazelton, seconded by Member Rivet. Be it resolved that the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Georgian Bay grants provisional consent to application number B24-01, dividing the subject lands identified in the application and municipally known as 7443 Lake Joseph Road into retained lands and severed lands subject to the following conditions. 1, that the agent or owner satisfy the township planner assigned to application B2401, acting in their sole discretion, how the final scoped environmental impact study regarding the subject lands provided by the township is revised to address all peer review comments. 2, that the agent or owner apply to and obtain approval from the Township Council for an amendment to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended to rezone parts of the severed lands into the rural zone to an RU exception holding zone to create regulations addressing the recommendations of the final scoped environmental impact study and address compatibility with an existing land use on adjacent lands. And 3, that the owner retain an Ontario land surveyor to prepare and register on title of the subject lands a reference plan delineating the retained lands and severed lands proposed by application B24-01, and that the reference plan as registered on title filed by the township, and that the owner make payment in lieu of parkland to the township pursuant to subsection 51.1 paragraph 3 of the Planning Act and the Township Bylaw 88-74, where the payment is 5% of the fair market value of the severed lands identified by a qualified real estate appraiser retained and paid for by the owner. And 4, that the owner satisfy the chief building officer of the township, acting in their sole discretion, that the owner provide satisfactory information regarding the existing private individual septic system on the retained lands, including its proper working order. And 5, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes are paid up to date regarding the subject lands. And finally, 6, that the owner retain and pay for a lawyer to affix the certificate of consent to the deed no later than 2 years from the date of notice of decision pursuant to subsection 53, paragraph 42 of the Planning Act, and that consent given lapses 2 years after the date of the certificate of consent, unless the severed lands are transferred pursuant to subsection 5343 of the Planning Act. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried and the application is approved unanimously. Thank you. The next application on our agenda is A23-18 for 211 Pecuniary Lane. And as I mentioned before, there has been a recommendation to defer this application, and I will read that resolution. Moved by Member Matthews, seconded by Member Jarvis.
Excuse me, sorry, since I was going to recuse myself, perhaps my name should not be on that motion.
Very well. We are going to strike your name and replace it with Member Schmidt. Thank you, Member Schmidt. You're welcome. I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment defers minor variance application A23-18 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 211 Pecuniary Lane. And the reason for the deferral is that we are lacking some information that hopefully we can get resolved in the near future. And I would ask for all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand.
Presume I should recuse myself from the vote.
You don't have to, because we didn't really do it, but anyway. Thank you.
I'm sorry if the vote, apologize, Mr. Chairman, if the vote, just want to make sure that the reasons for the deferral are written into the resolution.
Very good.
Okay.
We'll do that. And did you find that the reason given was satisfactory for deferral?
I'm not sure what the reason given is at
The reason for the deferral is that the committee does not have all of the information needed to come to the decision, and based on the fact that there was some information distributed to some members of the committee in regard to this application where others were not included. So I think it's unfair for a decision to be made if all people don't have the same information. You had a question, Member Rivet?
Yeah, just a question. What other information are we, you mean other than the letters that the letter that came in today? Is there additional information coming forward?
There was information that came in that the, let's say, the clerk's department is investigating as to the appropriateness of that information. So there are some questions about this application that are going to require it to look at a little bit later.
So is it is the committee asking it to be deferred or the applicant asking for it to be deferred?
The committee.
Okay.
And yes.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, I think we need a little more precise on that motion. It's not information, it's correspondence that was not received.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So it's correspondence that wasn't received. So Madam Secretary, do you have that? Well, all right, then again, I've read the application. I see that everybody's hand is up. Up again. So the motion is carried and the application is deferred. And I would also like to add for the record that the deferral is unanimous. Okay, our next application is A24-15 for 2 Island 4100 Georgian Bay. To the planner, please.
Through the chair, the purpose and effect of this application is to facilitate the construction of a sleeping cabin, recognizing a decrease in minimum front yard setback of 12.4 meters, whereas section 4.12 allows for a minimum front yard setback of 20 meters. The justification behind the decrease in minimum front yard setback is related to terrain constraints. The proposed location of the sleeping cabin is atop a rock ridge. Moving the sleeping cabin to meet the required 20-meter setback would move the proposed location of the sleeping cabin off of this rock ridge and require vegetation clearing and terrain leveling elsewhere on the property, likely at a lower elevation. The subject lands is an island property under single ownership on Georgian Bay with a lot size of 5.01 acres and a frontage of 466 meters. As seen on the survey displayed, the proposed location of the sleeping cabin is similar to that of the existing sleeping cabin to be removed. Construction of the sleeping cabin in this area will work to minimize terrain alteration and vegetation clearing. Further, the proposed sleeping cabin will be accessed by the existing walkway extending from the cottage to the existing sleeping cabin. Here are 2 photos of the existing sleeping cabin. The rock ridge spoken about previously can be seen on the image on the right side. Meeting the 20-meter setback would require the structure to be moved to the lower laying wooded area in the background of the image on the left side. Here are 2 photos of the subject lands taken from the water. On the left side is a view of the existing sleeping cabin and the cottage from the west side of the island. On the right is a view of the existing cabin from the north side of the island. As you can see, the area of the existing sleeping cabin as well as the proposed sleeping cabin is only semi-visible from the west inlet of the island. Based on the information submitted and a review of the provincial policy statement, the District of Muskoka official plan, the Township of Georgian Bay official plan, the Township of Georgian Bay zoning bylaw, it is staff's opinion that the proposed minor variance application is consistent and in conformity with the relevant policies and provisions and represents good planning. Therefore, staff are recommending approval of the application. Thank you.
One letter of objection was received from Catherine Cooper.
Jillian Grant online, please proceed.
Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, quite clearly.
Because Mr. Tom Hill, I couldn't hear what you just said. prior to me coming online. Also, my husband, Gordon Potts, is sitting in the room with you. So I missed, if there was a question, I missed it, but perhaps my husband, Gordon Potts, heard it.
The question was, on as the applicant, do you have anything to add to the comments that were made by the planner in support of your application?
Nothing to add. Much like the previous applicant, me and my family have been in the area since I was a kid over 50 years ago. We have the same commitment to preserving the land, the water, the trees, the birds, as many in the township. This is a small sleeping cabin, and we believe it does protect the integrity of the land. And first of all, there's very little boat traffic near us, but if you did happen to drive by in your boat, there's almost no chance you would see it. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you much for that. Is there any member of the public, either in person or online, that would like to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public session and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And do we have any comments or questions? Member Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair Hill. To the planner, sometimes we get into issues on islands, particularly of what constitutes front yard. How do we determine that this is actually in the front yard of this development?
Under our zoning bylaw, through the chair, under our zoning bylaw, with islands under single ownership, all yards are considered the front yard. So no matter where this sleeping cabin would be proposed, it would be located in the front yard.
Thank
And
you.
it would have to meet
Clears
that
one up. And then one further question is, what differentiates a cabin from a cottage?
It would be the kitchen facilities. So in this case, the sleeping cabin is only fitted with a bedroom, a small amenity space, and a bathroom, and there's no kitchen facilities. There's also size restrictions as well. So the maximum allowed sleeping cabin size is 56 square meters, and the proposed sleeping cabin size for this application is 42.9 square meters.
Thank you. I just note in the drawings that there is a sink located outside of the bathroom as opposed to inside the bathroom in a counter area that could be misconstrued, I guess, as representing something that could have future use as a kitchen facility, which does concern me considering everything else that's in that building. So nice design. It seems to be well hidden and well placed on the island, so I have no issue with that. But I am concerned that there is the possibility that this construction could be misinterpreted as a cottage based on the facilities provided within it. Do we have any way of restricting that other than by way of inspection, post-build and all that stuff?
Through the chair, I believe that's the only way we can really restrict or monitor it is post-inspection. We have no control through our powers of where they locate the sink.
Yeah, and even if the current owners promise that they wouldn't be using it other than a cabin, that wouldn't restrict any future owners from converting it, unbeknownst to planning staff, CBO and all that. But okay, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my only comment would have been nice to be able to do a site visit, particularly when you talk about the site that's already cleared and if you moved it. For me, I'm a visual learner and I would have appreciated that. Kind of hard to get out there in March, although this year maybe we could have by vote. So I'll just throw that out again. That is there any way that island water-based properties can be reviewed during voting season? Would be my comment to the planning staff.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. I'm sorry, Member Rivet.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is there a reason the cabin could not be moved back to meet the setback?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicants have conveyed to me that it's through terrain constraints. As you can see through a couple of the site photos, it's already located on top of a rock ridge. Moving it back would lower it to a much lower elevation and require more woodland clearing. The proposed location of the sleeping cabin is in the same location as the existing sleeping cabin to be removed. So it's more of ease of removing that sleeping cabin and already having that building envelope ready to be reconstructed.
I see another hand up. Is there anything else, Member Ruitt?
So yes, just to confirm, so none of the trees that are located, I can't tell what they are, what those circles are there. Are they trees?
Yeah.
Something doesn't say, okay. So it can't, but so it looks like it could, I don't know what the direction is here, if we're talking north, it couldn't come back. It couldn't come further back and a little to the west if north is the top. I'm just suggesting it's close enough that it could meet the setback.
Through the chair, the
Again,
applicant can confirm this as well. The scale of the drawings might be a little bit confusing, but even if moving it slightly to the south and to the east, it would still not meet that front yard setback. It would be less of a variance requested, but it would still require a front yard setback variance.
And Member Jarvis, you had a question?
Yeah, just really quickly, just follow up to Member Matthews' comments. Did you make a site visit to this?
Through the chair, no, I did not. The CBO and the director can confirm this, but I believe with the next round of minor variance applications, we'll be going out with the building inspectors to complete island site visits. But for the April meeting, we did not conduct site visits. The site photos I received were from the applicants.
Yeah, and I appreciate the photos that were provided, just didn't have them before. But I would also agree that it'd be great if the opportunity was provided at least for members of committee to inspect these applications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Hazel?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on comments that Councillor Jarvis made, where in his view, it sounds like or looks like another cottage, although it's called a sleeping cabin. And one of the things that, and this may be a question for our planning department, we have lots of things coming here and to planning council where people want to build sleeping cabins with awesome views of the water. And the focus is not a sleeping cabin, it's another cottage. I think that's a concern that I have. I heard earlier that there was a potential to move the thing back, but that there would be it would be lower and not likely have as good a view and things like that. And so what I'm interpreting from those comments is it may be possible to move it back. It may be possible to have a different design. Right now, it's a sleeping cabin with a living room and a lounge area and a potential dining room. And I'm just concerned that we keep seeing over and over again second cottages being proposed but called sleeping cabins. So that's a concern I have. Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead, Andrew.
Through the chair, I'd just like to address that moving the sleeping cabin back, there was no concern about the view to the water. It was rather a concern over elevation and respect to the high water mark, as well as vegetation clearing on the island where it wouldn't be required if it were to be built in the proposed location. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything, any further questions or comments on this application? Yes, Member Matthew.
Question through you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, can you just tell us the size of the old sleeping cabin, if you have that information?
Sure. Through the chair, the existing sleeping cabin to be removed is 14.62 square meters, and the proposed sleeping cabin to be built is 42.9 square meters, with an increase in mount of 28.28 meters squared.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no further questions, I will read the resolution. Moved by member Predko, seconded by member Schmidt. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A24-15 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 2 Island 4100 Georgian Bay to facilitate the construction of a sleeping cabin with a minimum front yard setback of 12 meters. The above noted approvals are subject to the following conditions: that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision, and that this decision applies only to the proposed sleeping cabin as indicated on Schedule A attached hereto and forming part of this decision. Any other variances that may appear on the schedules that are not listed in the written decision are not authorized, and that this decision expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the development. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes in favor. Those opposed are 2. The motion is carried and the application is approved. Our next application is A24-16 for 880 Hungry Bay Road. To the applicant, or to the planner, please.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just having technical difficulties here.
Would you like us to try another one and come back to down?
I apologize, Mr. Chair. The computer and me are just not getting along this morning. The next item on the agenda is A24-16 and the property is 880 Hungry Bay Road. The owners are John and Pam Devitt, and it's for a minor variance this morning. As you can see on your screen, the location map. Pre-application consultation was completed in February of this year, which did result in the submission of a minor variance application. The proposed development has been modified following the pre-application consultation to only require a minor variance for the construction of a detached dwelling on the subject property. At the present time, there are a number of buildings on the property and there are existing two existing cottages. Boy, oh boy, it's Friday, isn't it? These 2 cottages are to be demolished in their entirety and one new cottage to replace the one closest to the waterfront. The owners are also proposing to construct a detached garage on the northerly end of the property, which will meet all the zoning bylaw requirements. As you can see on your screen now, this is the existing here. And as you can see, there are a number of buildings. There is one existing dwelling right here where my cursor is. There's also another one at the north end of the property, as well as a sleeping cabin and some other smaller structures. During the redevelopment of the property, both of these dwellings are to be demolished. This existing sleeping cabin here will remain. And there is another bunkie that is in this area that is going to be removed. There's an existing septic system right here that supports the waterfront cottage, which is also going to be replaced and be new. on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see that this is the proposed development. So even though they are replacing this existing cottage here, it is not supposed to, it is basically going to be in the same location and somewhat of the same footprint as the existing. The new garage is to be in the same location and almost identical footprint as the secondary cottage to the north of the property. So the variances that are required, because of the size of the dwelling and because we are taking it as a new build, based on the fact that, the increase in square meters would have been very large if we went with the legal non-complying status. So we took it right from, basically it's a brand new build. So we are looking for a variance to section 6.3 with the minimum front yard setback. The required, as you know, is 20 meters. And we are looking at 11.24 meters, which is actually back further than the existing. Maximum gross floor area of a dwelling in this area is 275 square meters. The owners are proposing 352.1. And section 4.20 of the zoning bylaw also talks about projections, and the maximum deck projection is required is 4 meters, whereas the owners are requesting a 10.49 meter projection. The owners have also done a landscaping plan. We had discussed some additional plantings that would be required based on the fact that we are basically rehabilitating portions of this property with removing structures. So they have submitted a landscaping plan, and as you can see, they are extensively going to fill in this area along the shoreline, which, as you know, is required under our official plan and zoning bylaw. And I believe that the owners are taking, doing their due diligence when it comes to this kind of requirement. So in conclusion, the Committee of Adjustment has the following options as they relate to the variances being requested under section 45(1) of the Planning Act. They can approve the application as recommended by planning staff with reasons. They can deny the application with reasons or defer the application with reasons identifying the additional information or actions that the Committee of Adjustment considers necessary to make the decision. As you can see the rendering on the screen, it's a very attractive looking structure that they are proposing, and I think it will fit in nicely with the environment surrounding the property. So staff are recommending approval of the application based on a review of the relevant policies, feels it's consistent with the PPS and meets section 45(1) of the Planning Act and does represent good planning.
Madam Secretary,
8 letters of support were received from Andrew Fren, Larry and Monica Linson, Joan Sanders, Vladimir and Linda Sladek, Mike and Louise Hyder, Pauline and Grant Garrett, Linda Shute, and Kaja and Carmen Licko, and 1 letter of interest in application from Dunkley, Funnel, and Kelly family.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present and do they wish to comment on this application? Do we have the applicant online?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Would you please come forward to the microphone and identify yourself for the record, please?
Come by Zoom, but you know, on the side, face the fog and the rain.
Oh, we're glad you're here.
Hello, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Debbie Turnbull, Dirt Tech Engineering, 230 Boland Crescent, Campbellville, Ontario, L0P1B0.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to thank Deb for the great presentation of the proposal. Just a couple of just clarifications in citing the new build. We wanted to make sure it was not taking out any more vegetation, so we pushed it back as far as we could on that existing envelope. So because there's a lot of mature trees around there, and we didn't want to disturb that because it's already denuded in the front. And you can see from the drawings right now, you see is an 8-foot lattice wall basically right on the water and the existing building. So we want to rehabilitate the shoreline as far as possible. For the GFA, I know things are in the works, but if you just take the GFA of the first floor and the second floor, it basically meets the current requirements. It's the inclusion of a basement, which this is going to be their permanent home. and they really would like to have some basement, full height basement for storage, which is going to be over the 1.8 meters. So that's what's really putting it over the allowed GFA. And just in conclusion, I think there's a lot of net gains to be had with this property. That setback is going to be more than doubled from what the existing is. We're taking 2 whole cottages down to just 1 cottage, 2 bunkies down to 1 bunkie, 2 sheds down to 1 shed, and it's diminishing the lot coverage overall. So I think all in all, there's a lot of net gains in this.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Long trip from Campbellville.
It is.
Is there any member of the public who wishes to address this application? Yes, sir. Please come forward to the microphone and identify yourself.
Thank you, Chairman Hill, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Len Dunkley. I live in Barrie. We're the adjacent property at 875 Hungry Bay Road. No questions, no concerns, just wanted to see and exploring the opportunity what the township would lay out with respect to the road allowance that separates Dunkley property from the Devitt's property. There is a road allowance, and what the opportunity would be to possibly purchase that 50-50 in combination with the Devitt family. So it's more of an inquiry question. I understand this is not the time and place for this necessarily.
No, but you got the right people in the room.
Okay.
You can ask them after the meeting for sure.
Thank you. And that was basically my inquiry. Thank you very much.
All right, no problem.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for coming by. All right, if there are no other questions from the public, I'll close the public sector and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And Member Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Questions really just around the GFA, and the agent clarified some of the numbers, and I'm just wondering if it's hard to tell from the pictures, but really what's the height clearance of that basement level? And from a GFA perspective, can you confirm that the main floor and the upper level are less than the GFA cap? Actually, I can kind of see it on. It looks like it's
Basically, the
1.22 meters.
Excuse me, would you mind coming up to the mic? That way we'll have it as a part of the record. You're going to be on TV.
Yes, the upper floor and the lower floor comprise 272.6 square meters.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't get that. So the combined of the 2 floors is 276?
As 272.6.
272.6
square meters. It's the basement that puts it over to it's the inclusion of the basement.
Yes, the other,
75.
so it's a partial basement then to take
Yes,
you up
it's
to
a partial basement.
352.
Yeah, just enough, where are they gonna put their Christmas decorations, you know? They just want some storage in the basement, yeah. Full height
Thank you.
storage.
Okay, so it's only like 75 square meters and the amount of storage in the basement.
Yes, yes. Mhm.
Okay, and that's defined by the 1.8.
Yes.
And then just to continue very briefly, the remaining structures are primarily all being removed and replaced, so we'll have building permits for that. And then the garage, it's probably premature, but will there be sleeping a cabin above?
No
Okay.
sleeping. It's just a 3-car garage.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay. Member Jarvis, please.
To the planner, what's the current GFA for the 2 cottages that are existing on the property? I may have missed it and I apologize if I did, but I'm just curious to know what that is.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did have that in my report. Sorry with the computer problems this morning. I'm kind of winging it here. I apologize.
I'm not gonna ask the same question.
So the two existing dwellings, the privy and the shed that are being removed is a total of 310.2 square meters. And the proposed dwellings to be 352, which is approximately a 13% increase overall.
Right, okay, thank you. And then one further question, just related to that, to the public notice you indicate, and I think I'm answering my own question by doing this, but just to be clear, in item 2, in the purpose and effect in the public notice that you put out, maximum gross floor area of dwelling, permits 275 square meters or 5% of lot area, whichever is more restrictive. Just curiosity, what would 5% of the lot area represent?
Oh, just bear with me. I'll do the
Yeah,
math
sure,
for
yeah.
you.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Turnbull.
It's 269.3 meters squared.
That's the 5%?
That's the 5%, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But okay, so state in the public notice, whichever is more restrictive, so shouldn't the 269 be the number that shows up as the required as opposed to the 275? Not that it matters, it's a matter of 6 square meters, but. Okay, I don't think it makes a hill of beans difference here, but I was just curious, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Schmidt.
So is it possible that the 275 normally on the 6 Mile Lake SR1, SR6?
SR6.
Any property that's over 1 acre or greater is 275. So I think that's probably where you pulled that from.
Yeah.
It's not, that's the community plan that gives 275, not
That's
5%.
correct.
So
Yeah.
it is correct, just different spot, I believe.
Thank you.
So the total lot size here is over an acre?
Yeah, it's 0.53 hectares.
0.53 hectares. Okay, then we're good. And again, just to be clear that the new development, including that 75 meters of basement, is pretty darn close to what's being removed. We're just cleaning up the area, 2 places going, 1 remaining. Any other questions or comments regarding this application? Yes, Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. I did have the opportunity to get out to the site. And I think this will be a net gain, as the applicant's agent has alluded to. Removing a couple of major buildings and some bunkies to a new build, I think would be a welcomed site for the lake and probably the neighbors.
Okay, thank you very much for that. If there are no further questions or comments, I will read the resolution. It is moved by Member Hazelton, seconded by Member Matthews. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approved application A24-16 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 880 Hungry Bay Road to demolish 2 existing dwelling units on the property and construct a new single-family dwelling with an increased high water mark setback than the existing dwelling as follows. A setback of 11.24 meters, front yard setback, gross floor area of the building of 252.1 square meters, and a maximum deck projection of 10.49 meters. The above noted approval is subject to the following conditions. One, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision. And two, that this decision applies only to the proposed detached dwelling as indicated on Schedule A attached to and forming part of this decision. Any other variances that may appear on the schedules that are not listed in the written decision are not authorized. And three, that the owner prepare and submit prior to issuance of a building permit, an erosion and sediment control plan to the sole satisfaction and approval of the township, and that said approved ESC plan be installed and maintained throughout the duration of any construction on the property. And finally, that this decision expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for this development. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. And what would that,
There was other further plantings that were gonna be required. And I don't see that in the resolution.
That's correct, because I wasn't recommending it. They just did it out of the goodness of their heart. I wasn't recommending that as a condition.
Okay.
They just went ahead and did the landscaping.
Okay,
Plant-
thank you. Okay, got it.
okay. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand again. Oh, thank you very much. The motion is carried unanimously, and the application is approved. Thank you. Our next application is A24-18 for 2825 Honey Harbor Road. To the planner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, I'll share my screen. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, everyone present here and online. My name is Jeff Kratke. I'm a planner 2 with the township. I am a registered professional planner. Application A2418 is regarding lands municipally known as 2825 Honey Harbor Road. The agent, Victoria Hoffman, is here. She is with Flow Drawings and Design Inc. The location of the subject lands are in the Honey Harbor community. And as you can see, they're in a area very close to the former Honey Harbor School. The site plan that was submitted for the proposed sunroom shows the proposed sunroom in this area. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to read the purpose and effect. The purpose of the application is to request relief from column 2 of table 6.2 in subsection 6.3 of the zoning bylaw, increasing the maximum lot coverage from 7% to 10.2%. The effect of the application allows expansion of an existing legal non-conforming shoreline dwelling, including lot coverage of 8.3%, which is one of the existing legal non-conforming rights, where an existing deck is demolished and replaced with the construction of a new sunroom. On the site plan, the proposed new sunroom is approximately, is located here. This is a surveyor prepared document. The line, which may not be apparent, is here, and that is where the deck extends to. The front lot line is this lot line. And so given our zoning bylaw, the way the width of the dwelling and other things are measured is a point here is a line is drawn straight across the lot to this point. And because of the very small projection here, there is no actual difference in the width of the dwelling being proposed. Additionally, the legal non-conforming right arises from this point here, again, because this is the front lot line all the way around. And so the minimum setback from the shoreline is in this location. And in this case, this measurement from here to here, which is the nearest point that the proposed sunroom would come, is again, is within the legal non-conforming rights of the proposal. The difference really is that the existing deck is less than 1.2 meters above the grade and therefore is not counted in lot coverage, where the proposed new sunroom will count as part of lot coverage. And this is a look at the existing facade of the building facing approximately west, where the existing deck leaves the facade at this area. And this is a view of the proposed new sunroom, again, provided by the agent. The district official plan and the provincial policy statement in this matter have some issues. There's fish habitat, there are deer wintering yards, and there is a PSW. There is also the Coldwater Lake, which is Georgian Bay, which is as well considered to be an important fish habitat. The district also mapped the PPS concerns regarding hazard lands and also the wildfire hazard risk. The wildfire hazard risk here clearly is very, very low and is not an issue. However, the mapping that was prepared on behalf of the district used remote sensing to try to identify the 100-year flood line as well as the 15-meter wave uprush. And while this is certainly within those areas, my inspection of the property led me to determine, and I may just back up my slide a little bit. That there is a significant top of bank essentially here with a very steep rise from Georgian Bay. And it, short of some tremendous disaster beyond the capability of anything we've planned for, there is little to no likelihood that a wave would reach the proposed new sunroom. And so I have not requested any kind of coastal engineering be looked at. However, I did, as a result of the double-edged sword of that grade, ask for a non-engineered erosion and settlement control plan as one of my conditions. So just in summation, in my opinion, the proposed development is consistent with the PPS and does conform with the intent and purpose of the district official plan. The Georgian Bay official plan, it was a little more difficult, and I won't go in depth in my report. There's a very detailed review of the various policies at play here from the Georgian Bay official plan perspective. I will simply state that in my opinion, this proposed sunroom is consistent with the intent and purpose of the Georgian Bay official plan. And certainly if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Lastly, again, the intent of the Georgian Bay zoning bylaw, I believe, is maintained. Again, this is not a situation where there really is new coverage on the lot. This deck will be replaced. There's only a 5.25 square meter difference between the existing deck and the proposed new sunroom. So in summation, Mr. Chairman, it's my opinion that subject to the conditions that I've recommended, that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and satisfies the appropriate 4 tests under section 45(1) of the Planning Act, where the lot coverage was not an existing legal non-conforming right, and that those tests under the Planning Act, and again, it satisfies all 4 in my opinion, are meeting the general intent and purpose of the official plans, meeting the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, being minor, and being desirable for the appropriate use or development of the subject lands. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kratky. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence in this application?
3 letters of support were received from Rick Parnell, Trevor White, and the Metherall Family Holdings. On March 26, 2024, the Severn Sound Environmental Association wrote without recommendation, but to remind the owners to practice good stewardship and implement best practices to preserve, protect, and enhance natural features, and noting water levels on the Great Lakes fluctuate. No other agencies wrote regarding this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public present or online that wish to address this application? Please come forward and identify yourself for the committee.
Thank you, Chair Hill. My name is Armin Grukaitis. I own A&A Services, which owns the property 2 doors down from the subject application. I wasn't asked to provide a letter of support, but I would have. And I'm here to voice my opinion. And that the subject property is a fairly high point of land, as our planner indicated already. And I think there's going to be a lot of other, I was there in 1986 when our property was 3/4 flooded with the uprush from a big storm in December, which some of you will remember. And so that property was high and dry when I drove by with my truck. But I think another point of support would be that it's a residential property, but it's actually, or part of it's residential anyway. And it's surrounded by commercial properties which have 30% lot coverage. And so I don't think that the relief that's being sought is significant. And if I was on the committee, I'd certainly support it. Thank you.
For your unbiased opinion, Member Grukaitis. And Ms. Hoffman.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Victoria Hoffman from Flow Drawings, 3 Violet Drive, Port Severn. Thank you, Armin. He kind of harped on what I was going to mention, but I appreciate that. Yeah, this property, you know, essentially the intent for this design was just to kind of create an indoor-outdoor space as the property owner who's been a part of this community for decades, ready for retirement. The lot coverage, I hope, honestly, for his sake, but yeah, so the existing lot coverage is 9.06. We're going up to 10.2 in the way of the non-compliance 411. Our gross floor area is only increasing by the 7%, and the other areas that we need to kind of watch are remaining as they are. The idea with this is just to extend an existing roof line. So the goal from the water, it's going to look very similar. I'm here to answer any questions, but feels pretty straightforward on my side.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any member of the public present or online that wish to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public portion of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And Member Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I just confirming something. The current deck that is there is not part of the, included in part of the GFA because of its height off the ground, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this application was not scrutinized from the perspective of GFA. I do appreciate that the committee is asking us in the future to screen all applications for GFA, but the legal non-conforming rights did not provide that this application be considered under subsection 4111 of the zoning bylaw. So it's not under 45.2. This is a 45.1 of the Planning Act. The variance is beyond what was legal non-conforming, and therefore it is being tested today under the full 4 tests under the Planning Act.
Okay, makes my next question, maybe I'll ask it anyway. The proposed level floor of the addition sunroom would be the same as the current deck anyway, correct?
So the new porch will be the same height as the living room that it's coming off of. I think right now the deck is like 7 inches lower. So
Oh, so not that much. Okay, there is a difference, but not much. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or comments regarding this application? All right, seeing none, I will read the resolution. Moved by Member Rivet, seconded by Member Jarvis. Be it resolved that the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Georgian Bay grants the minor variance proposed by application number A 24-18 increasing maximum lot coverage from the 7% to 10.2% regarding the subject lands identified in the application and municipally known as 2825 Honey Harbor Road, pursuant to a subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act and subject to the following conditions. One, that the owner or agent prepare an erosion and sediment control plan per township guidelines submitted to the township planner responsible for the application for approval, and the owner follow the ESCP throughout the construction to prevent debris from running off the subject lands into Georgian Bay. And two, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes are paid up to date regarding the subject lands. And three, that the owner obtain a building permit within 3 years of the date of the notice of decision regarding application A24-18, where the drawing submitted for a building permit shall be in accordance with the site plan by Rudy Mack OLS dated March 6, 2024, and floor plan building elevation drawings B102, C101, C201, D101, D102 by Flow Drawings and Design Inc. on February 8th, 2024. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried unanimously and the application is approved. Thank you. It's been recommended that we take a short bio break. It is now 11:40. I would ask that we re-engage by 11:50. Thank you.
Go for lunch. Yeah.
Hi, Dale. Good.
No. She asked where she gets it.
Okay, it's now 11:50 and we are ready to go again. We're just waiting on our Secretary Treasurer.
Can't start without her.
Thank you, everyone, and I'd like to call the meeting back to order. It is now 11:53 on April 12th. Our next application today is A24-19 for 183 John Buchler Road. To the planner, please.
Thank you, and through the chair. The purpose and effect of the application is to facilitate the construction of a dryland boathouse with a decrease in minimum interior yard setback of 2.1 meters, whereas section 4.1.2 allows for a minimum setback of 5 meters, and an increase in height of a dryland boathouse of 4.9 meters, whereas section 4.1.12.4 allows for a maximum height of 3.7 meters. The subject lot is 0.86 acres in size with a frontage of 47 meters along 6 Mile Channel. Although 6 Mile Channel is part of the Trent-Severn Waterway, a dryland boathouse is not subject to Parks Canada approval. However, if the applicant were to propose a loading ramp or rails in conjunction with a building permit for the dryland boathouse, a Parks Canada permit for shoreline work will be required. A township road allowance formerly existed between the subject lands, being Lot 2 on the survey, as well as the neighboring lot to the south of the survey being 197 John Buchler Road, or Lot 1. The road allowance was purchased by both lot owners and split. The applicant is proposing to construct the dryland boathouse within the former road allowance with a reduced interior side yard setback to 197 John Buchler Road. The owners of 197 John Buchler Road have submitted a letter in support of this application. The applicant is seeking relief from the dryland boathouse height provision to provide adequate enclosed storage space for watercraft. Further, the increased height is partially due to the desire to mimic the roofline of the existing cottage, creating an overall aesthetically pleasing property appearance from the water. Here we have some site photos of the proposed location of the dry land boathouse being in the former shore road allowance. Development in the proposed location will result in the loss of only 3 mature trees. Based on the information submitted and a review of the provincial policy statement, the District of Muskoka official plan, the Township of Georgian Bay official plan, and the Township of Georgian Bay zoning bylaw, it is staff's opinion that the proposed minor variance application is consistent and in conformity with relevant policies and provisions and represents good planning. Therefore, staff are recommending approval for the application. Thank you.
One letter of support was received from the neighbors Monica and Oscar Singer.
My name is Linda Hartmann. My husband and I own the property. Well, if there's any questions anybody has, I don't want to take too much of your time, but we did purchase this property, this lot that was in between. The neighbor came to us, they wanted to expand a little bit on their cottage, and so we took a third, they took 2/3. They also had a road allowance that was on that property that the previous owner had given them, so it's a very steep lot, and so we just felt it was better to get rid of the lot altogether. So because there would have been, if they were going to be able to build anything on that, the previous lot, then it would have, there wouldn't have been enough setback before the hill started, so it could have been an issue. We didn't really want anybody there. So we decided, let's just get rid of the lot. We each took a bit of it. And so then we just would like to put a dry boathouse on that area. And I don't know if there's, the picture of the shoreline there, it's very jagged around there. So we tried to fit an area that would be good to put a dry boathouse on, because there's a lot of little juts and turns, and so that's part of why we are asking for variance. I know, I'm like my husband. I agree with you. It's a very steep lot down there, but it's actually very beautiful. Yeah, no, it's very nice. I mean, my husband's excellent at picking lots, and I was a no at the beginning, but he picked it, and it's actually very nice. And if there's, bad weather, we lose power like other people, but we usually don't, the cottage is kind of untouched, so that's a benefit to having big, huge hill behind you.
Thank you. I was trying to get in before Member Jarvis. I'm just curious with the dryland boathouse very close to the water's edge. Are we concerned, is that lake very well controlled from a fluctuation of water? I know if it was on our island in Georgian Bay, it would be washed away in the first fall storm probably. So I'm just curious as to how the water fluctuates in that area and how the building would be protected.
Through the chair, I believe in that area it is controlled water body and the water does not fluctuate the same way it would in the open Georgian Bay waters.
Other questions or comments? Member Jarvis, please.
Yes, I really have very few concerns. I'm just curious to know if there was any consideration given, and this comes back to other applications we've had for side law setback and privacy, et cetera. The 5 meter guideline that we have in place, or the bylaw rather, is really because of privacy issues. Was there any consideration to moving that boathouse closer? I mean, that there's a shed between the proposed boathouse and the cottage that I know is coming down. Was there any consideration given to moving the boathouse closer to the cottage in order to achieve the 5 meter setback on the side yard?
Through the chair, and the applicant can confirm this, I believe the location of the boathouse was to satisfy an area that would be easily accessible from the water due to the jagged property lines. As well as mentioned, they received a letter of support from that adjacent neighbor, having no concern with the reduced side yard setback.
And I understand that neighbors can be very, very neighborly in situations like this, but that doesn't preclude what might happen in the future with future neighbors. So I think we should be considering these things down the road. Again, I don't have any real objections with this. I just wondered if it was considered, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Member Petco?
Thank you. And through you, Chair, just one question to the planner. You had made reference to a number of places to the height of a dryland boathouse. Is there a different height restriction for a dryland boathouse versus a in-water boathouse, or is that strictly just with clarity when you were writing the report?
Through the chair, in the zoning bylaw, there are two separate sections for height restrictions against a dryland boathouse or an in-water boathouse. They are both measured independently.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I don't really have any other issues. I will stop my questions. Thank you.
If I could just extend that question, what is the difference? You know, in a case similar to this, is a floating boathouse allowed to be higher than one that's dry land, or is it the opposite?
Through the chair, it's all dependent on the size of the property. In the case of a dryland boathouse, and I believe in the case of an in-water boathouse, it's measured as per the frontage of the lot. So in this case, the lot frontage of the subject lands is 47 meters. So it would fall into a certain category in the table in the zoning bylaw. And as per that table, it's 3.7 meters is the maximum.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I will read the resolution. Resolved or moved by Member Predko, seconded by Member Schmidt. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A24-19 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 183 John Buchler Road to facilitate the construction of a dryland boathouse with a minimum interior side yard setback of 2.1 meters and a maximum height of 4.9 meters. The above noted approvals are subject to the following conditions. One, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence with Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision. Two, that this decision applies only to the proposed dryland boathouse as indicated in Schedule A attached here to and forming part of this decision. Any other variances that may appear on the schedules are not listed in the written decision are not authorized. And that this decision expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the development. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried unanimously and the application is approved. Our next application is A24-20 for Tulin 2 Island 1865. To the planner, please.
Through the chair. The purpose of this application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw to facilitate the construction of a roof over the deck attached to the front of the dryland boathouse. The subject property is an unsubdivided island with an area of 2.8 acres and a frontage of approximately 140 meters on Georgian Bay. The lands are designated waterfront and zone Cognizant Shoreline Residential Island. The applicant is proposing to extend the roof of the dryland boathouse to cover the deck attached to the front of the building. The dryland boathouse has a legal non-complying floor area and encroaches over the front lot line. A building permit has been obtained for the reconstruction of the existing dryland boathouse without the roof extension. The variance being requested is as follows: a dryland boathouse that encroaches over the front lot line with an increased gross floor area from 39.57 square meters to 54.83 square meters, whereas section 411AI does not permit an increase in gross floor area in a required yard. Note that floor area differs from gross floor area, and the variance is required for the gross floor area. By covering the deck with a roof, it becomes a porch. The Cognizant Coastal Waterfront Community includes porches in the calculation of gross floor area. The dryland boathouse encroaches over the front lot line, whereas a 0-meter front yard setback is permitted, and therefore the gross floor area of the building is increasing in a required yard. Tests for an application for permission to expand under section 45(2) of the Planning Act are whether the application is desirable for appropriate development of the subject property, and whether the application will result in undue adverse impacts on surrounding properties. When applying these tests, only the proposed expansion may be evaluated for undue adverse impacts. The committee can approve the requested variance as recommended by planning staff, or they can defer the application to a later date if additional information is required to come to a decision. For the committee to deny the requested variances, the undue adverse impacts of the proposed expansion must be demonstrated by objective evidence and must be sufficient to override the property owner's right to reasonable flexibility, evolution, and expansion. I would also like to add that at 10:25 this morning, a new letter of support was received from Lauren Cameron. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, do you have any correspondence on this application?
One letter of objection was received from Catherine Cooper, and one letter of support was received from Russell, Donna, and Alita Starr.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant or their agent present? And if so, please come to the mic and identify yourself.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I wanted to put a little bit more color behind the application. Dr. Plaxton and Dr. Wakim, who are the owners of the property, have asked that we apply for permission to rebuild their existing dry boathouse, which is failing structurally and aesthetically. The permit was already granted for the reconstruction of the new boathouse on the same footprint, exactly the same size as the previous one. The structure was already approved for building, but earlier this year, the Plaxtons and Wakims asked if we could apply for a variance to add a covered unenclosed porch, as shown in the drawing submitted. Additional interior photos were supplied this morning supporting the existing uses, and that was in response to I got a copy of a letter of opposition to this application from planner Shania. And so in response to Kathy Cooper's letter, I was able to provide some photos. I've got them here if anybody would wish to see them, but I believe maybe Kaylee, would you? Thank you. Just like Vanna, wait. Probably lost my place here. Anyway, I think the letter of criticism was that it was really a bunkie and so forth. It's definitely not a bunkie. You can see from the letter or from the pictures that we took it this morning at 7:15 that it's being used as storage for dry boathouse. It's a tool shed, it's a craft shop, all of the above. The family often sits by the water next to the existing boathouse to enjoy the view and the wind shelter that the dry boathouse provides. They felt if they could add the unenclosed porch roof to the new structure, it would also provide added protection from the sun and from the rain. It's a long walk up a slippery, rocky slope to get to the cottage. And sometimes rain squalls that blow through lately, inconvenience them, and they would just like to be able to stay sitting by the water if possible. And the structure is approximately 200 meters from the closest cottage on Stars Island, for which we have a letter of support. The Stars, or the former owners of the 3 properties on Stars Island, and are now tenants of Mr. McCain. And the recent letter of support that we got from Mr. McCain's property manager represents 13 neighboring properties, including the one that the Stars are tenants for. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for those photos. But was there a certain thing that we were to find in those photos other than the use?
Well, really, it was in response. I just got the letter that Shania provided us yesterday late afternoon, and I was surprised when I read it, because I read through our application and I saw nothing that would indicate that this is going to be a sleeping cabin. And so I thought I better get something to support what we're applying for.
And is it the purpose of the application to replace this with a completely new structure?
Correct. The permit is already, Chair Hill, the permit is already in place for the reconstruction, but it was an afterthought to ask for that roof. And when we applied for that, the planning department indicated we'd need a variance, and that's why we're here today.
Okay, very good. I'm sure there'll be questions if you don't mind remaining there. Is there any member of the public that is present or online that wish to address this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public portion of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or observations or concerns. And let's begin with Member Matthews.
Very kind of you, Mr. Hill. Thank you. Just those photos prompted a question, Mr. Gates. I see it looks like a heater, like a propane heater or something in that existing building. Will that be in the new building? And what would be the purpose of it if it's not going to be habitable?
We obviously didn't have time to stage the boathouse this morning at 7:15. And
I understand a November packup, right?
Yeah, and that's what happened. Really, it's everything. And I'm sure I did actually call the applicant early this morning to make sure they wouldn't be too embarrassed with me sharing how their boathouse looks over the winter. But they said, no, just to prove your point, you should do that. And you can see, I believe that building is probably actually from the 40s or the 50s. Just based on the lumber and the type of construction,
Yep.
It's had a few repairs, but it's pretty rotten. And so
it looks like the type of heater you'd use in an ice fishing hut.
Well, it seemed to have a smokestack and everything, so that's, I'm just curious if there's any intent to reinstall it in the new building. Because that would raise a question to me about habitability, right?
Thank you for the question. And through you, Chair Hill, if there's any, I don't know that there's any regulation that precludes somebody from having a heater in the boathouse, because it's a dry boathouse is often used as a workshop, craft room, that kind of thing. So, or if you're working on an outboard motor in November or early in the spring, you want to keep your hands warm. So I suspect that there is a possibility or even a probability that they'll want to have some heat in there, but it's really just incidental to the main use for storage and workshop.
Are there any other questions or comments? Member Predco, please.
There we go. Thank you. Through you, Chair, just a question to the agent, and and this would be a question. I realize it would be an issue for the existing building permit, because you're not moving this property, this building off its current footprint. But it looks like it's overlapping the high water mark. And I know it's right now it's on stilts at the front of the dwelling. What construction approach are you taking to, mitigate the risk for high water and interfering with the support of that dwelling?
Through your chair, Hull, and thank you for the question. I'm happy to report that the existing spindly supports will be replaced with 5.5-inch, half-inch wall pipe that's concrete filled, and with 18-inch I-beam that's going to be welded onto that. So it'll be built very similar to a shore platform or a fixed dock on Georgian Bay. And as discussed earlier, we have significant fluctuations in water level there. Although this one, I don't think the floor has ever been wet on it with the high water, but it's going to be much more robust than it is today.
Okay, thank you. That's really
Thank
all
you.
I have.
Okay, Member Jarvis, please.
I appreciate the chair's indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Notwithstanding the fact that by right, there are certain allowances already in our bylaws, and the fact that the current building has already got a permit for replacement, and we're only looking at covering the new deck. I'm very, very concerned, apropos what was just commented on by Member Predko. If that floor is anywhere level with the 86 high water mark, then it was underwater in 2020 because my dock was, and it'd be basically the same level. So there's my primary concern. Unfortunately, that has nothing to do with the application before us. And I really am seriously, I get really upset by my application. The screened-in porch that is showing in the current building is there going to be a screened-in porch over and above that covered portion of the new structure?
Through your chair, Hill, the previous building was screened, and if you look at sorry for the poor photos, but you can see there are shutters inside. And the new building is actually framed wall with glass panels, just mainly for lighting and enjoying the view when you're working in the boathouse. But so yeah, the screened area is not going to be screened anymore. And in fact, there is no application to screen in the covered porch. If you look on the drawings, there's no knee wall, there's nothing there. It's just an open covered porch, basically for shelter from the sun and the rain. And probably, as you can see, the boathouse is pretty full. So I imagine there'll be the odd kayak and canoe under there if this is approved today.
Thank you. Just finally, definitely the pictures do depict what you described, but in my mind, something new like that, if it looks like a duck, smells like a duck, it's a duck. And in my mind, this thing is not going to be much of a boathouse and more of a living quarters. Can't do anything about that. That's not the application, and that's not what we're seeing. But I really disagree with the concept of putting a cabin of any sort like this right on the water, basically, which is what it is, because we know what water levels do. Anyway, those are my comments.
Good point. And just to extend that a little bit, we've had feedback from our chief building official on numerous occasions about the fact that they are the ones that monitor this through the bylaw enforcement if there is use of that other than what's defined by our bylaws. But still, again, more of a question than anything else, as what Member Predko said. The amount of water level increase that we had over the past couple of years seems to be significantly more than what's shown in this picture. I'm assuming this picture is fairly recent that shows what, maybe 4 feet or so of clearance from the water to the bottom of that. Does the building permit take that into consideration? Do you have to make sure that you're a certain distance above the high water mark when you complete this construction?
Through the chair, no, there's nothing in the building code that does regulate that. There is talk in the building code in relation to floodplains, but this does not fall underneath that. I think there would be a good way to find out if there had been trouble in the past. That building was rather old and there would have been substantial damage to the floor if water would have been an issue. And to my understanding, and it's been a while, I think, since that permit was issued, but I do believe it was designed by an engineer, if I'm correct.
Through you, Chair Hill. Yes,
You want-
we did, thank you for your comments, Kelly, and we did hire an engineer to design well, we designed it and then the engineer blessed it basically, but based on our experience. But there isn't really a building code, but there's a common sense code. And when somebody is, that's why they come to us. We've been doing this a while. And, any of the contractors in the area are very familiar with high water and low water and so forth. And so I can assure you that to your concern, that is definitely above the high water mark. And we can even, if it's the will of the committee and the building department, we can provide an actual elevation to prove that it's going to be well above 177.4.
Yeah, we're obviously the planning department would have reviewed those requirements as part of their recommendation to approve this application. So I don't think we need to go there. It's just that as people who see these applications often, we're always concerned that there may be a situation where high water level that we've experienced in the last couple of years, like we've never done before, that's taken into consideration. So with that, if there are no further, there is a question. Member Hazelton, please.
Probably less of a question and more bridging from what Councillor Jarvis said about ducks. I like the duck analogy. But one of the comments I was going to make is when I first looked at the application, I was going to state that it doesn't look at all like a dryland boathouse. But Armin, your pictures that you sent in provide a very different picture. So I guess they're having a garage sale, are they soon? But the point, if I could, the previous application that was a dryland boathouse, that was a duck for sure. It looked like a dryland boathouse, and it was a dryland boathouse. This to me looks like a wannabe sleeping cabin, and I would doubt that if somebody's going to go to all the effort to do all the engineering and rebuilding it, that the pictures will be reflective of what's inside it. But sadly, there's nothing we can do about that. And as far as I'm concerned, once the building is there, adding a deck to it, adding a porch over the deck is incidental. So,
okay, yeah. If I could just ask the planning department the same thing, do we have different regulations for a dryland boathouse than we would cabin? I guess you couldn't build a cabin that close to the water. So the requirements for a dryland boathouse would obviously allow you to do that.
Through the chair, a dryland boathouse is permitted to be within 20 meters of the high water mark, whereas a sleeping cabin is subject to a 20-meter setback.
And is there any discussion with the applicant as to the use of the structure once it's completed? If he calls it a dryland boathouse, then as Mr. Hazelton would say, it's a duck. So want to comment on that? Yes.
So through Chair, the permit for the boathouse is already issued, so that's kind of off the table. It's a replacement of what was there. Just so you know, when we do get these applications, we do write no human habitation on it, unless it was proved that at some point previously down the road and planning department signs off on it that it was an actual sleeping cabin, but those chances are very small. So right on the actual plans, it does say no human habitation. What we find that will allow for is that sometime down the road, if our bylaw department does receive a complaint because the permit's closed, at that point, it would be a zoning infraction that our bylaw officer then would probably come to us, review the plans, understand that whoever built it or the previous or the current owners may not know, or the current owners do know, that it is not supposed to be human habitation. And then they would process it from that standpoint, where they would either tell them that they need to remove it or take them to court to gain the compliance to remove whatever human habitation might be in there.
Okay, thank you. I think we understand that. Armin?
I know my turn is over, but if any of those were questions, I'd like to respond. Just to set everybody's fears, to allay their fears. The applicants have asked us to design a full-size sleeping cabin for them with all of the appropriate setbacks and engineering that's required. So they already have a plan. They're just like, that's one of the reasons that in my view, if you can let me editorialize a little bit, on Georgian Bay, there are many large properties. This is a 2.8 acre private island. And they're actually allowed, if you have more than 2.5 acres, you're allowed 2 bunkies up to 600 square feet each, providing they don't have any kitchen facilities in them. But you're allowed a full bathroom. It can walk, it can dock, it can have a living room and so forth. And I know quite a few of the councillors have buildings similar on their property, and nobody's concerned about that. So I think that as the families get older, kids grow up, they make more kids, and then you need more space. So I think that's just a normal evolution of the Bay here. And there are lots of other controls in place, not the least of which, as CBO told us, that they'll be doing checks and so forth. And if a bylaw infraction happens in the future, then they'll be made aware of it.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Member Matthew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just would like to direct this to Kaylee. Kaylee, I appreciate that insight that you do put information about non-habitable on the application, because that was a suggestion I had, that maybe we could just add that as a term, but if it's already there in the building permit, then it's great.
Right. So through you, Chair, well, the reason we do that also is because obviously it affects the septic system as well. So that comes up in a few different instances for us, not just planning purposes. So the building code and sometimes the zoning bylaw don't give us a lot of options for enforcement, or for not even so much enforcement. We can't make people do certain things. So that is the best thing that we currently can do in order to help the situation somewhere down the road when if somebody does change something they're not supposed to.
Okay, and just on this notice or notion of not for human habitation, there's a definition there, so that, as Armin mentioned earlier, the owners of this structure could have a craft shop in there, they could have a workshop, they could have a washroom, they could have a heater, they could work all night. And whether that's considered habitation or not is sort of a gray area, but I don't want to beat this to death, but these are the sort of things that come up often, when applications are submitted to the committee. So
Sure, hold one. Sorry.
Let me just go quickly.
You're probably going to say the same as me.
Yeah, Chair, there's 2 different things here. So there'd be 2 different types of interpretation. There'd be the building department interpretation and the planning department interpretation. Because obviously our no human habitation is more related of septics and living space for septic purposes. Theirs may be due to actual use. So, a little dependent, they still kind of cross over one another when you look at it down whatnot. But again, there's also, in the case of this building, it would depend on what it was previously used for and if you could prove that.
right, okay. I think we're good on that. But you're gonna offer something different than that, Armin?
I just wanted to add that as far as I'm aware, and the plant, we've got a bunch of planners here that know better than I, but I don't believe washrooms are permitted use in a boathouse.
Is that correct, Shania?
Through the chair, it depends on where this boathouse is located. Some waterfront communities, I know from experience, Go Home Bay, for example, does not permit washroom facilities in dryland boathouses. But if there was a dryland boathouse on a property zoned SR1, not within a waterfront community, I believe the zoning bylaw actually does allow for it.
Okay, Member Jarvis.
It's amusing. We're talking about something that the application's got nothing to do with. The application is to do with the roof over the deck, not the cabin itself. I think I started that.
Yeah.
And I gratefully make the observation that I don't see any plumbing at the part of this application or the previous application or the previous usage of the building. So yeah, we're just talking about a roof. We can voice our other concerns, which I will do vehemently with the planning department outside of this meeting, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other further comments? Okay, thank you. I'll read the resolution. Moved by member Hazelton, seconded by member Schmidt. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment hereby approves the following variance requested under minor variance application A24-20 to facilitate the roof over a deck on a legal non-complying dryland boathouse. A dryland boathouse that encroaches over the front lot line with an increased gross floor area from 39.57 square meters to 54.83 square meters. Whereas section 411 AI does not permit an increase in gross floor area in a required yard. And subject to the following conditions. One, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to the property that is subject to this decision. And two, that this decision applies only to the dryland boathouse as indicated in Schedule A attached to and forming part of this decision. Any other variances that may appear on the schedule that are not listed in the written decision are not authorized. And that this decision expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for this development. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried and the motion is carried unanimously and the application is approved.
Thank you all.
Our next and final application is A24-21 for 519 Lone Pine Road. To the planner, please.
Through the chair, the purpose of this application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw to facilitate the construction of a detached garage with a secondary dwelling unit having an increased height and located in the front yard. The subject property has an area of 2.59 acres and approximately 140 meters of frontage on Lone Pine Road. The lands are designated rural fringe area and zoned residential type 1. The lands are located within a deer wintering area habitat known as Stratum 2, which is less sensitive to development when compared to Stratum 1. The site visit was conducted on March 25th.
Thank you.
I was not done.
Oh,
1 second.
but please proceed.
Through the chair, the applicant is proposing to construct a detached garage with a secondary dwelling unit in the front yard, whereas the zoning bylaw permits accessory buildings containing a secondary dwelling unit in the rear yard. The applicant is also proposing a building height of 5.72 meters, whereas 4.5 meters is permitted. The building will be set back 12.2 meters from the front lot line, which exceeds the minimum front yard setback of 7.5 meters in the R1 zone. The building is located on the west side of the property where it will be surrounded by mature trees and natural vegetation. The lands that abut the west side lot line are undeveloped and the boulevard contains trees which will screen the building from Lone Pine Road. The building is located on the perimeter of the tree line near the road and only those trees within the abutting building will be removed. Here, the lands are relatively flat and the trees are not coniferous, which tend to form thermal cover for deer in the winter. The building has a ground floor area of 71.35 square meters to be used as a garage and a second floor with an area of 55.69 square meters to be used as a secondary dwelling unit. The zoning bylaw states that secondary dwelling units shall only be permitted in accessory buildings that comply with the minimum yard requirements for the principal building of the zone in which it is located. The detached garage exceeds the minimum yard requirements for the principal building on the lot. The committee can either approve or deny any one of the variances being requested. The committee can defer the application to a later date if additional information is required to come to a decision. Planning staff have completed a detailed analysis and are recommending approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence on this application?
No correspondence has been received on this application.
Is the applicant present and do they wish to address the committee on this application?
Hi again, Victoria Hoffman, Flow Drawings and Design, 3 Violet Drive, Port Severn. There was, for this project, just to give you a little background, Shania did a great job as normal, but this building was originally designed as a garage with a sleeping cabin above it. With that, the principal roof met the 5 meters that would have been allowed for the sleeping cabin above. What ended up happening is came to light was that they wanted the cooking facilities, and this property does actually allow for the secondary dwelling unit, which was not very common that I actually get into the R1 properties. And with that, we just kind of kept the roof line the same, and we added the cooking facilities, which pushed us in the dwelling unit direction, which was kind of going to be the intent for this space was for it to be used by family members on a permanent basis, so it made sense. The location, however, it just didn't make sense to extend the driveway and kind of alter the property more than they needed to. This was kind of the obvious spot. I'm here to answer any questions if you have some, but that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address this application? I see we have a member of the public in here. Are you Mr. Leduc?
No, I'm not Mr. Leduc, but I'm his first cousin, and it's gonna be a dwelling for me.
Okay, well, thank you for attending, and we'll see you.
We grew up in Missouri, we grew up together, we got the same great grandparents.
Okay, thank you. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address this application? Either present or online? No one? Okay. Then I'll close the public portion of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we have any over here? Very good. Member Jarvis?
Quickly, do we know that, just looking at the satellite photo of the property, I presume there's going to be vegetation removed. Is that significant to your knowledge? Yeah. No, well, the overhead doesn't show that. I'm just, the reason I asked, and the fact of the matter is if we had to move it back, you'd be removing even more vegetation to accommodate that. So, okay, thank you. Too high. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Member Matthew?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've said this before, but Victoria, thank you for your detailed drawings. It makes my job easier, I think, and I probably speak for the rest of the committee. Nice to see the full drawing and the person and what's planned out. So thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, if there are no further questions or comments, I will read the resolution. Moved by Member Matthews, seconded by Member Predko. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Community of Adjustment hereby approves the following variances requested under minor variance application A24-21. One, that a detached garage with a height of 5.72 meters, whereas 4.115A permits a maximum building height of 4.5 meters, and an accessory building having a secondary dwelling unit in the front yard, whereas section 4.25 BI only permits a secondary dwelling in an accessory building that is located in the rear yard, and subject to the following conditions. One, that the owner provide a property tax certificate or correspondence from Township Financial Services indicating that all property taxes have been paid up to date with respect to this property that is subject to this decision. And two, that this decision applies only to the detached garage as indicated on Schedule A, attached to and forming part of this decision. Any other variances that may appear on the schedule or attachments that are not listed on the written decision are not authorized. And three, that this decision expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for this development. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried unanimously and the application is approved. I have a further resolution here, moved by member Predko, seconded by member Matthews. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment does now adjourn at 12:40 p.m. until May 16th, 2024 at 10 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. The motion is carried unanimously.